Welcome back to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, hosted by Echo and brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine. Today, we're joined by Michael and Linda Benton from VyClimb for an honest, thoughtful, and incredibly relevant discussion on safety culture, organizational values, and leadership in aviation, especially in the air medical world.
One of the things they said was the biggest fault of SMS, they believe, was branding it under safety and not like an operational management system. Because with that safety tag in there, and you probably all heard it too often, other departments look at it like, oh, safety, they just make more work for everybody. Like, oh, that's a safety thing, like the safety guy or the safety gal will take care of that. We don't have to worry about it. Instead of saying this is a holistic system that will make us not just safer, but more efficient.
Yeah, I think you hear that a lot. You know, it's that whole like, well, we can't get anything done, so we're going to put it under safety because safety is the only thing that gets the attention. We dig into the real factors that shape safe operations every day, from psychological safety and communication to fatigue and training realism, to how organizations can align their stated values with what employees actually experience on the line. We also explore generational shifts in work expectations, the challenge of speaking up in high-pressure environments, and why a truly effective safety management system has to be more than a binder on a shelf. It has to be lived, practiced, and supported from the top down, so that it fosters a safety culture where people truly feel empowered to speak up when something doesn't feel right. This is a conversation about building trust, developing leaders, and creating a culture where safety isn't reactive, it's intentional. So buckle up, because this one is packed with perspective, experience, and takeaways we hope every one of you brings back to your bases. So let's get into it. Thank you to our sponsors, Metro Aviation, Spectrum Aeromed, and Airbus.
Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine. Produced in partnership with Echo, Every Coast Helicopter Operations, the Valor Flight Crew podcast promotes the personnel and life-saving equipment behind helicopter air ambulance services. Join hosts Mike Fideli and Blake Schreider for in-depth interviews and expert insights from air medical personnel, pilots, communication specialists, and maintenance crews who play critical roles in airborne emergency response.
Line 1 accepting.
Copy, line 1, gotcha, accepting. You're going to be talking to Red Feather 1 on LCEMS.
My exposure internationally to safety is through these conferences that we go to, right? One of them that we like to go to is the CHC Safety Conference, or Safety Summit is what it's called. Mm-hmm. If you haven't been there, I encourage you to go. It is fantastic. And a very remarkable experience that I had my very first year there. So it was 5 years ago, at least. So a CHC Safety Summit it was held in Canada, and you have oil and gas, you have search and rescue, you have air medical, you know, the whole gamut, right?
Yeah.
Even some cargo operations, fixed wing, rotary. And we're sitting in this classroom and we're learning about, you know, safety systems. We're learning about SMS. We're learning about safety culture. And, you know, my table, there's a wide range of people there. You know, there's a parts manufacturer, there's an oil and gas person, there's cargo, like we're all in it together. And sitting across and a table next to me is the CEO of Shell in the same class as people at the line level learning about safety. And that just hit me as like, that's how you do it. You have someone as high as you can get in your company, high leadership position, learning about safety and safety culture at the same time as someone at the line level or your safety manager, so that they're learning the same information. They're learning about how to improve their culture, and they're learning at the same time so that when they go back to their organization, you know, the safety manager doesn't have to pitch these new ideas, these new wild, crazy safety ideas to, you know, their CEO or their director or their supervisor. They already know it. And so they're already together as a team cultivating a better safety culture. So we can do better with that for sure.
Yeah. And I think Linda wasn't that same room? There was a CFO that was in attendance. So you think back, your CFO going to a global safety conference, and she was one of the most vocal, engaged people in the room, talking about initiatives and safety and ROI on safety and that type of thing. I mean, it was interesting at the CHC summit this year up in Vancouver. One of the things they said was the biggest fault of SMS, they believe, was branding it under safety and not like an operational management system. Because with that safety tag in there, and you probably all heard it too often, other departments look at it like, oh, safety, they just make more work for everybody. Like, oh, that's a safety thing. Like the safety guy or the safety gal will take care of that. We don't have to worry about it. Instead of saying this is a holistic system that will make us not just safer, but more efficient.
Yeah, I think you hear that a lot. It's that whole like, well, we can't get anything done, so we're going to put it under safety because safety is the only thing that gets the attention, right? Like I've heard that from multiple people at many different agencies, where it's like they're like, in order to get anything done, it has to go through this particular route, and it shouldn't necessarily have to be that way. And I like, that you brought that up, because it really should be all encompassing. Yes, it is that SMS system, and safety is a huge part of all of that, but it's only one piece of that puzzle that we really need to bring all of those others together.
Yeah.
I think that highlights that point, that the safety is just part of the everyday operations, and you wouldn't think of it anything different because that's just what you do day in and day out. But how many times have we had you know what, let me ask the safety guy. I think we got a guy for that, right? So I think we got someone. Let me ask him, should we store the flammables by the combustibles? Like should we put it up? No, we shouldn't do that. Like that one that should just be an inherent like part of everyday operation, and man, I think that just sheds a lot of light on, like you said, you put that label on it, and like you said, someone thinks, oh, it's more work for us, or, oh, well, no one listens to me, I'm just the medic. But if I tell the safety guy that, hey, we're doing a lot of lifting, like we're moving a lot of stuff and we don't have the right equipment to do that, but no one's going to listen to me, but they'll listen to the safety guy. And it just highlights that should just be part of the everyday culture in the day-to-day operations and how we do our job. And it's so multifaceted. I mean, there's a lot of different aspects, and I think, Mike, we've had this on many podcasts before, that people like to use the word safety and it sounds great. And, it says we have safety, but like, what do you do to follow up with that? And I mean,
absolutely.
I don't know, like for industry wide, like what are, let's say in the States, what are like the biggest three that you guys could say are the biggest three safety issues that we're seeing from our industry, and what's being done to improve those, instead of kicking it to the safety guy and be like, it's their problem.
And it's interesting because, rather than point to like a specific thing, right? Like, oh, ice on the ramp, that's dangerous. Like that's, I try to think like bigger picture.
Sure.
Right. So I think having individuals on having individuals on the team that have the mindset of controlling what they can control is huge. It's a pretty common thread where you go to places and, maybe there's complaints, bigger picture complaints, like our avionics in the aircraft are outdated, or our hangars, dilapidated, and, whatever, that kind of thing. There's a lot of those complaints about like those big things, aging aircraft, general safety decision-making. And hate to say, but a lot of times that person that's complaining about that is, sleeves are rolled up on the flight suit. They're wearing tennis shoes. They don't wear their goggles when they're trained with goggles. They're provided with goggles. They choose not to wear them because they're uncomfortable. Right. Maybe they don't fit right. Helmets all askew. You know what I mean? So like, to me, that's a safety concern, not just for that individual, but because that person presenting themselves like that, when they come forward with an issue, they're not taken seriously.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm late for work, I'm out of uniform, I'm kind of a mess. And maybe this is my army showing, but you're not like, you don't have your own stuff together.
Right.
So then when you try to bring up the bigger issues, you're just kind of discounted, unfortunately. So I think that's number one. I think if people can like self-reflect, get their act together, get it back to where it would have been kind of that first 6 months of work,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're using the equipment they're provided, then they can tackle and bring up the bigger things, and they'll have more weight. And that's I'm saying that to like help people, right? To help these
Right, right.
individuals that are trying to make the case. If they're just kicked back complaining, that's what it's going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're doing the right thing as much as they possibly can, and they bring up an issue and they do it through like formal channels, it's taken more seriously. I think that's probably my first. I mean, now I feel like I'm an old man standing on my porch shaking my fist.
Get off my lawn.
You got your soapbox over there.
Yeah. The next one is, and I'm not paid for by the comm centers, but I have a special place in my heart for the comm centers, because if you think about it,
Absolutely.
think back to your larger programs, right? Your base is going in out of service all the time. Has your comm center ever been allowed to just go out of service because of staffing or because of weather? Never, right? Comm
Never
center
once.
is
Never
always in
once.
service. Even if you shut down, like, I don't know if you guys ever do this in Pennsylvania, like lake effect snow, whatever, but like you might actually close a base because you're like, hey, the roads are dangerous. Nobody should be driving. But the comm center's got somebody in there to answer the phone,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So with that responsibility is giving them the job descriptions, the authority, the pay that like reflects how important every single trip and transport that flows through there. But then going a step further and assuming that they have kind of repeatable processes in place for decision making. The problem we see from a safety aspect is crews that continuously question the comm center's decision making. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, that's a gray area, right? Because you do need to question decision making if there's a problem. Like, you need to speak up. But if this is like a decision that's made, that's, hey, this is a fixed wing transport, this is a rotor wing transport, whatever it is, you may disagree with the method or the mode of transport, but that's a conversation that typically needs to happen after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, that's what the post-transport debrief I talked about earlier, that's what that's
Mhm.
for. It erodes trust, right? We see it time and time again. It's not just one program we're talking about, but the comm center is frustrated because they have their algorithm that they follow. And based on all the moving pieces that they can see from their higher level, they make a decision and try to launch a base that may not be the closest base, but there's a reason for it. And then the transport's delayed because there's like, well, what about them? What about us?
Right.
This whole back and forth
Mhm.
thing.
No, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
Aren't
it
they
happened. I get it.
closer?
I don't know what you're talking about.
And I know that, right? I flew the line. I remember thinking like, man, why are they sending us? This is crazy.
Right.
But like being ready to go, taking the flight and talk about it afterwards. Because a lot of times all that discussion is in the front, the flight's delayed, the flight happens. And then you look at the debrief form and they're like, everything's fine. Everything's good. So it doesn't paint the whole picture.
Right.
Sure.
So, third one, I got one more, I think. Fatigue is a huge issue, I feel like, across the industry, right? It kind of got highlighted with COVID and kind of post-COVID. And it's, the pilots have their risk assessment generally, and they have their regulations around rest. Clinicians are getting there, right? You're seeing a lot more places that have fatigue risk assessments for clinicians.
Mhm.
But it's pretty rare to see fatigue risk assessments or any kind of process for comm centers, for mechanics, even your admin staff. Like, what about your program director, right? There's probably a chance that they could do a fatigue risk assessment and probably shouldn't be making decisions at certain times, right? It may not be as life or death. But I feel like that's a pretty big issue that we're seeing across the board.
I love those things that you brought up there, because when I look back at my career in air medical at this point, and I think about all the experiences that I've had and the days I've shown up to work tired and the times I've rolled my sleeves up because it's warm and I'm uncomfortable and all of those other things that have happened. Like, we've all been guilty of doing some of these, right?
Yep.
I think that it's easy to get caught up in some of that, or even just not think about that in that particular moment.
Yeah. I mean, talking about complacency, I mean, I think back, and I'll keep it short, but I think back to my Army days. Like, complacency enough that some of the guys on our crews would stop wearing body armor,
Yeah.
not taking their rifle. And they're like, yeah, I just leave it in my locker. I don't, it's hot. It's too hot. And I mean, that's like the epitome of individual responsibility and accountability. Like, someone might have to tell their family member, like, sorry, your daughter is dead because she didn't wear body armor because it was hot.
Right.
You know what I mean,
Right.
but that may seem extreme, but you can translate that to our industry, right?
Mhm. Sure.
Dave
For sure.
Repture, that's one of the accidents I investigated up in Frisco, Colorado. If he had decided not to, to leave his flight suit halfway around his waist during that flight, he probably wouldn't be here today, right?
Yeah.
Again, I'm not an expert on that, but I suspect that flight suit saved his life.
Yeah.
So
And inherently, like, we all know coming into this industry, this is an inherently dangerous job. We know that when we sign up for this, we are signing up for something that is not risk adverse. We accept some of that to an extent. But I think it just drives home the point of, if we do accept that there is some risk with this, why are we also not doing the things that we can do to prevent those risks from being catastrophes? Why are we not doing the little things along the way that do increase our risk profile to make things better? And fatigue is a huge part of that. When you mention those things and doing fatigue risk assessments for the medical crews, we are a tired bunch. Like, I do the risk assessment for my team and look at, and we have both, pilot and both med crew members, and our communication center is also doing a risk assessment for each shift as well. And I mean, I gotta say, we're a tired bunch, but I think that's industry wide. I don't think that's singular to any one place. I think that we have so many of these other things going on externally, or challenges going on in life, that it's easy to show up to work and be like, oh, I only got a couple hours of rest, but I'm gonna hope that I can get a quick nap when I get in there, right?
yeah,
Like, it's easy to do those things. And I think that we get caught up in that so much sometimes, that it's we learn to slowly accept more and more of these risky behaviors, if you will, rather than sticking to our guns and, like you said, remembering what it was like those first 6 months. And I think it's just a good reminder to be able to have that self-inflection and look back and see, what can I do better? What can I do in my practice that is going to not just make me safer, but my team safer and my patient safer?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, save lives, and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
it reminds me of a program a few years ago that, and details should be a little murky here, but the pilot was fatigued, very fatigued, and he spoke up during the brief, my understanding, and said, "I'm exhausted." And they all knew that this person was going through personal things outside of work, trading shifts so that they could fly nights, so they were available during the day to deal with their issues. So they're not really sleeping much. And my understanding is the rest of the crew is like, "Okay, yeah, we'll keep an eye on you." And on their flight back to shore, the pilot fell asleep. Luckily, autopilot was on, but they overflew the hospital, and I think that's when the crew, they're working on the patient. And I think they remember, based on the the peripheral vision of kind of where you're at in the city, woke them up and landed the aircraft. So it's kind of like that. You got to change your mindset. If a crew member, one of the three, is like, "Man, I'm exhausted, keep an eye on me," that's probably an easier thing for them to say than, "I'm exhausted, we need to be out of service."
Right.
So someone else needs to do them a favor and say, "Hey, we're done. Like, let's just go out of service." Now, I know it's easier said than done. Some leadership teams, or I should say management teams, might look at that and, have punitive action against that situation. But it's for your own good, right? Speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, Linda, from more of an organizational perspective and on the side of things that you're seeing, the work that you guys do at VyClimb, what kind of maybe safety culture issues are you seeing within organizations that are things that hopefully would be relatively easy to try to fix? What can we work on? What can we do better?
Yeah, I think what kind of surprises me going into a lot of the smaller organizations probably is that the SMS mandate, right, is the
Mhm.
mandate is like next year sometime. Um, they say they have an SMS, but they don't really know what that means.
Mm.
They just, it's part of the pilots, they can put in a safety report and, maybe we'll look at it. We have SMS. It's fine. They speak up. And instead of looking at it like a holistic, organizational wide process, it's not just flight operations. It's when you're, going through any sort of changes in the organization, who does it affect? And what can we do to mitigate the risks on the organization, on the people? So it's like that understanding of what SMS is and what the purpose is and why we're doing it. I see that as a big gap right now, and hopefully within the next year, a lot of these organizations can get it together and improve.
Yeah, and I get it. Like it's not the big sexy helicopter that you're flying around in. It's not something that's super fun, right? It's not like, oh my God, I get to sit down and review the SMS manual today. Like that's not
Right.
something any of us sit down and say.
Said nobody ever.
Right. But it's
Yeah,
something that's so important to be done on a regular basis and to make sure that you're following through with those policies and procedures that are put into place through that manual.
Yeah, and I see it as more effective than the newest technology on the aircraft, right? Because you could
Yeah.
have a well-funded program that's got, the newest aircraft, the newest avionics, the newest autopilot, whatever you pilots say. But if they don't have that safety foundation in the
Yeah.
organization, now you're just relying on technology to fill the gap. You're not really empowering your people to be safe.
Without those core values and without like really embracing the things that need to be said or done and really operating safely, as good as that aircraft looks, it's not going to go anywhere. Like you're not going to do anybody any service. And it doesn't even have to be anything catastrophic. It can, Michael, like you said earlier, just some of those times, those instances that put you now out of service for something that could have been very easily avoidable, whether it be a personnel thing, these other little FODs, anything like that. All it takes is just those individual accountability, that core values, bringing that up from day one, including that in the everyday operations. The aircraft looks great, looks so awesome sitting in the hangar, but what's it doing? If we're not addressing the things properly and doing it safely and doing it day in and day out, then we're not helping anybody, especially not ourselves.
So maybe if we can switch gears a little bit then, and I feel like, because we tend to focus on, I think it's easy to focus on all of the things we're doing wrong. But I think at the end of the day, those things we're doing wrong are a tiny percentage of the entire industry, right? And it's the same thing I say with like post-flight debriefs. When I get back from a flight, everybody says, hey, you got any issues? No, we're all good. We go do our own thing, right?
Mm.
Well, do we also talk about our successes? And do we talk about what we're doing well as a team, what we're doing well as an organization, what we're doing well as an industry? So I'm curious, Michael and Linda, from your perspective and being able to go out and help all these different companies from across the U.S. to improve upon their systems and practices. What are some of the successes you've seen across the industry, and how can we continue to make those better?
That's a good point. It's as you were describing that, and Linda's going to roll her eyes here, but it made me think of the Swiss cheese, right? Like the Swiss cheese has a lot of.
There it is.
I can't.
That was good. Now I have to say that was probably one of the best eye rolls I think I've seen in a very long time.
You might have to cut to that, like when if you could hear her eyes rolling.
Yes,
but it's not. It's like we're making sure everybody's bingo cards covered, right, on the safety topic.
Right.
But no, like when you say, because that's a good point. Like when we used to do LOSA, line operations safety audit. I did that as a contract person years ago with the LOSA collaborative. One of the things they talked about was like the failures and the holes in the Swiss cheese, right? That's what we focus on. But what about the thick parts of the cheese? And if you look at a typical piece of cheese, like there's way more cheese than there are holes usually. So, the first couple that come to mind from the pilot kind of operational perspective is on the equipment side. So NVGs. And I know there's probably listeners like, what are you talking about? Like we've been using NVGs for years, why is that a thing? But you'd be surprised, right? There's still operators. I'd say there's probably still operators today that are not using night vision goggles. We're talking very small operations usually, but it wasn't that many years ago that we worked with a program that still wasn't using goggles, like literally just rolled out night vision goggles to their fleet. Huge improvement. And I think the reason I wanted to highlight that one too is because it is not uncommon for clinical crew members in the back to not have their goggles on and participate actively scanning, during departures and landings, that kind of thing. And I get it. I've never had to intubate. In fact, they had me play with a dummy once or a human simulator, and it was ugly. But I imagine that's...
Listen, if Blake can do it, anybody can. It's fine.
For real.
I think they told me I busted his teeth out, but whatever. But
they got more.
I don't know. I haven't done it. I can't. I imagine having night vision goggles hanging off your face while you're trying to do some of the more delicate stuff in the back is not really an option. But pausing or if you're in a situation where you're doing something critical with the patient and the pilot's getting ready to do their approach, I'd like to think that maybe 1 or 2 extra orbits isn't going to change the game, right? So an aircraft that could stay up higher and give it a minute while the crew in the back gets to a position where they can pop a set of goggles on and look outside and help them, clear the aircraft. It was interesting. I had this conversation with somebody once, and I was, pushing this idea of using night vision goggles, and they're pretty resistant to it. And they had said, if you can show me data that shows that night vision goggles prevented an accident, then maybe we consider it. I'm just like, that's there's not data that those accidents that didn't happen are just hard to, like, you can't quantify that.
Right.
You could probably say, okay, in the last 6 months, we've had, 15 times that a crew member pointed out a set of wires.
Yep.
That could have been a prevented accident or maybe pointed out traffic or that kind of thing. So I think NVG use, the importance of that is probably a big success. I'd say followed closely by helicopter specific avionics. And again, I'm kind of talking on the pilot side more, but Airbus has their new helionics or newer helionics system. And I don't know if it's the first, but it's one of the first avionics packages that was designed specifically for a helicopter and not just adopted from fixed wing. And there's, opportunities out there or events where there's like incapacitated pilot, which I know is a hot topic right now in the industry and has been for a bit. But they've got the technology in there that it's, a couple button pushes and that aircraft will pick up an approach and go to a hover. And at that point, you're kind of on your own, but that should be a survivable landing from that point.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I'd say successes is awareness about psychological safety. That was a big topic at the CHC Safety Summit this last year in Vancouver. And I was surprised to learn that, I believe it was, was it Australia? I think it was Australia that mandates psychological safety programs for employers. So they have to have programs in place and demonstrable performance showing that they consider psychological safety in the workplace. So yeah, we've got some catching up to do there. But I think the fact that we're having these conversations now, 10 years ago, these conversations wouldn't have even happened. So.
Yeah. And I'd also like to add that, yes, we've been focusing on kind of the easy negative aspects that we can point to, but the wide range of clients that we've worked with in this industry, I can think of maybe one out of all of those clients that didn't want to improve, right? They thought they had it all figured out. Vast majority of the leaders that we interact with want to be better. They want their teams to be better, want their operations to be better, to be safer. When I say better, it means safer. So like there's hope. Our leaders aren't maybe as bad as we see day to day, right? They just have a lot of pressure, right? Yeah. They want to be better. And it's, they also need, resources to get there. So.
I think that really kind of hits home that point. Like you said, for years, people were like, oh, you're a really great pilot. You're a really good clinician. Then all of a sudden you just got this leadership role and it was just kind of figuring it out. So maybe we're at these points, and I think it's probably just clearly evident by that speech right there about people wanting to make those changes and saying, hey, how can we be better for our people? And Linda, you have a immense background in finance and accounting. How often is it easy to blame, that cost, as a reason, like not saying that it's unsafe, or people just saying, well, we can't really move it forward because it's going to be kind of expensive to do this. Do you see that in this industry where people are kind of blaming cost for things, or are there other ways to kind of circumvent that and adopt a process that it doesn't cost a lot to just be safer, right? Or are you seeing anything like that where people are like, hey, this is just a little too expensive for us?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could write a whole blog post about that. People are very quick to be, they're very quick to say, well, this is never going to get through budget, right? We don't have the budget for that, or, it's going to cost too much. They're very quick to excuse the denial on budget. And in my experience, that's never the case. The case is that the people making the decision isn't just finance, right? There's a group of people making a decision. It's just one voice is finance. And of course, if things are too expensive, they're not going to say, this is too expensive, we're not going to do it. They're going to say, maybe this isn't in the budget. What else do you want to move to next year so that this can be done this year? There's give and take. But I would say the case isn't being made properly that this safety initiative is important.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, having our leaders be a little more skilled in presenting their case would go a long way, because there's not a finance person that I've experienced that would say that training is, we don't want to do that, it's too expensive, or we don't want to invest in this safety initiative, we don't want to save lives. We're going to put that aside.
Yeah.
It's,
Right.
What does this mean? Is this important? And maybe if you have a finance background, you don't understand what's important in terms of safety. So it's really like educating yourself to make the case to the finance people, because it's too easy to blame them on not getting something through.
And that's one of the things that she's very good at, is kind of helping, whether it be a program director or senior leader, put it into words that resonate with the finance and senior team, maybe at a hospital, that type of thing. We joke sometimes that it's a real thing. We joke about consulting magic, that often, maybe the program director or senior leader has been bringing up this issue for the last 6 months or 12 months and getting nowhere with it. And then these random consultants come in and say the exact same thing, and everybody's like pulling out the checkbook.
Whoa.
Yeah. What somebody said, you're never a prophet in your own land, that kind of thing. So we kind of like to proceed our projects with that explanation to the leadership team and say, look, like, if something makes sense, we will help you convert it into a language that resonates with a hospital CEO. That's that case of that one with the NVGs. Like, they didn't have NVGs.
That is truly an art in and of itself,
right?
Yeah. I mean, the one with the NVGs, it was like, it's not in the budget, we don't have the money, and it just kind of stopped at that program level. But in that specific case, we were reporting to the CEO of the trauma system, like the entire health system.
Sure.
So it took me less than 10 minutes to be able to go in and just, the bluff, right? Bottom line up front. It's like, NVG's minimum cost of entry. If you want to be serious about safety, this is the number one improvement you can make today. And the guy texted me shortly after, and they diverted funds from another completely different department of the hospital And it took about a week. He got approval a week later from the board to fully modify all of their aircraft, and it wasn't a small number. Factory training, latest night vision goggles, and just did it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was kind of a give and take, right? I wasn't trying not to be too specific about who it was, but they basically said, I didn't know if they were really willing to put their money where their mouth was, like if they were going to do it. And that was the first ask, was NVG mod for the fleet. And it probably took about 8 months for the whole project to get done, that piece of it. And they did it. And I remember when he texted me and said, I got approval, like, what's next? And the CEO said, is that proof enough that I'm serious? So then we just went down the list and just knocked out that low hanging fruit. And that program turned around. It was problematic before, to the point where it was potentially going to be uninsurable by some of the underwriters, to now becoming a kind of a flagship program as far as the insurance industry is concerned, because they really turned it around. So
It's awesome.
yeah, that was not a small price tag for that mod, for those
Right.
NVG.
Right. But that exemplifies exactly what you're just saying, in that both sides of the house, the front line and the back office, have to work together in order to accomplish these tasks. You can't have the helicopter specific avionics package or the NVGs or any of those awareness programs or safety programs, or your peer support or psychological safety programs, without having that financial backing. So you need to sit down as an organization and look through and say, how can we make this happen? Not a flat out no. It needs to be how can we make this happen? We've identified there is a gap here. How can we make this happen? And if those two sides aren't working together, you're never going to get anywhere.
Right. Yeah. And in that case, one of the other interesting points was, it's not the fault of that. In that case, it wasn't the fault of the program director for not being able to get those NVGs. They were just going with the information they had and presenting it and saying, like Linda said, it's not in the budget.
Right.
It's not in the budget. Like my KPIs, my bonus, whatever it is, I'm graded on meeting my budget. So there's no way I'm going to go ask for this. So that's where the consulting magic comes in, and I'm like, I'll go ask. I don't care. So
I love that consulting magic.
Consulting magic. That's awesome.
And the point is when I asked that question, I kind of led it with, you can't, if we're going to do this, if this is going to work, and that success that we had, I can't come in and tell you, hey, this is something you need to have. And then that CEO starts kicking desks over and yelling at their subordinate program director and saying, why didn't you tell me this? You're paid to tell me this. I said, let's not get hung up on that. Let's just fix the problem. But I explained to that CEO, I said, the KPIs this person's measured under drives them to look to cut costs as much as possible. And that equated to cutting safety. So they adjusted it. I don't know if it's stuck. I don't know if that's still the case in that program, but it was eye-opening for the CEO, because it was an unintended consequence of a KPI. So,
and I did want to take it back a moment to talking about those peer support programs or psychological safety policies. I think, to your point that overseas they are light years ahead of us. However, I am very happy to see, just in my tenure in the industry, that we are moving in the right direction. I think we still have a long way to go. And I think specifically on the pilot and the mechanic side of the house, I think on the medical crew, I think that we are certainly making a lot of advancements in that realm. And I think that we're understanding that it is impossible to do this job and not be affected in some way or another. But I think that we still either hold, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, our pilots and our mechanics in a little bit of a different realm, and they have the same effects going through this job with us, and we need to make sure that we're continuing to push those programs forward. And I'm seeing more and more organizations having their own peer support teams. I'm seeing others that are still utilizing external peer support teams, which is, I think, equally as important, because sometimes I don't want to talk to somebody internally who I have to look at the very next day, right? But the confidentiality of both of those being of the utmost importance, but really understanding that as an industry, we need to do better. And I think that is a huge success. I think we've come a long way, but I do think we can continue to grow that in just exponential ways from here.
Yeah. And there's actually, I think, some legislation out there for the pilot side, or at least FAA, which could extend a little to the mechanics about mental health. And
and I think you're starting to see that on like the airline level. some of the airlines do have peer support teams for their pilots, which I think is great. I don't know what necessarily that consists of or what kind of things they're able to discuss with them, but they do have peer support teams that are out there. And so we need to keep pushing that bar and keep moving that forward because we all have those stressors that we go through.
It takes everybody, and there's always this stigma, right, for the pilots. It just through all the conversations that we've had for things for years, like it's pilot or mechanic. They're like the first people to blame, anytime there's an incident, and it's like, it was the pilot's fault, but I think through so much work, and Mike, like you've said, we've
just
come
curious,
a long way.
is that still the same way at home between you two? It's always the pilot's fault.
That's why she drives more.
Listen, I always encourage my wife to drive as much as possible because I just feel like it's one less decision, but park wherever you want. I think it's great.
I haven't been relegated to the back seat yet. But I look at that as a status thing. Like when I'm allowed to sit in the back seat, that's like I have a driver.
Sorry to break your train of thought there, Blake. I just figured that was a valid question at the time.
Great. That was great. No, I just think that we've, and I think some of the last podcasts that we've had, like it was always just like the pilots or mechanics were like the first people to be scrutinized and looked at to be like, this was their fault. But to really peel some of those layers back to kind of be like, well, why did they make that decision? Well, it was a culture at the base, or, it was just how things were done. And I think it's really taken a lot of steps and a lot of, difficult conversations that need to be had. And I think I'm glad to see that, like, we should embrace some of that uncomfortableness or uncomfortability, and be vulnerable to just be like, yeah, like we should just be honest about this and be like, this kind of sucks. Like this isn't something we should be doing. And I think that, I think this has kind of paved the way for people to have that voice. At least where I work, and Mike, I know you're right there in the same boat, that there's a lot of embrace for people to just speak up and say things.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We've talked about, in the past on how do we help foster that? So like, how do we help people not only have the voice, but maintain that voice? And it's not always the pilot's fault. It's not the mechanic's fault. It's all of us together. And, from little nuance instances of like, we got the wrong radio channel, we weren't able to talk to LZ, like I said, it doesn't always have to be this catastrophic event, but it can be, like sorry, Linda, the Swiss cheese model of the things, but like it can be the other things that just make the job, like the job's already a little bit difficult at times. And it's just those other little added stressors of those other little things that make that task a little bit more difficult, to where now us as either the clinician or the pilot, it diverts your attention onto the things that we should be doing. Right. So part of this growing leadership and growing our organizations, like how do we help our people, those people that speak up? How do we help them? And I think, Mike, you've kind of used this terminology, the rising star, like those people that are not afraid to speak up, but they're doing it without, it's not a personal attack. It's just, hey, I think this is an issue. We should talk about it. Like, so how do we, looking into the future, like how do we embrace that? How do we keep promoting that? And how do we make sure that leadership understands that that's also important, but also the line level people, how do we make sure that we keep that importance and relevance to that and make sure that we keep improving that going forward?
Thank you to our sponsor, Spectrum Aeromed. Spectrum Aeromed is your trusted partner in aeromedical solutions. Experience safety and innovation with their customized interiors, designed for both rotor and fixed-wing aircraft. Elevate your patient care with Spectrum Aeromed. For more information, visit spectrum-aeromed.com.
I think through modeled behavior is probably the first thing that comes to mind, right? The leadership team needs to demonstrate that when they speak up to each other, that they're not shutting each other down. I know one of your guests recently, Dave Weber, is a friend of ours. We presented at the CHC Summit this last year on a topic we call the toxic trinity. And it's how ego, denial, and we know best can sabotage safety.
Mm.
And I think if the leadership team can kind of check egos at the door, right? Kind of push out, like it takes work, but push out that we know best mentality or that denial of like, we already got it figured out. We don't need your input. If they can turn those three things around, right, and encourage open the communication and demonstrate that behavior to each other, first of all, it's kind of like Linda pointed out, like adults, like parents and kids, right? I'm not calling flight crews a bunch of kids, right? But there is a little bit
All
of that.
depends on the day.
I was going to say, you're not far off.
Yeah. But I think it's just like the parents, right? Parents modeling appropriate behavior for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar. How, if I'm a leadership team and I'm like, guys, you need to be comfortable speaking up. It's fine. Speak up. It's no one's gonna crush your ideas. But then they watch how they work with each other, and that's not the case. Then again, it's the reality doesn't match the message. I might pass it to Linda. I don't know if she's got something to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just keep talking about it. I think we normalize that behavior. We talk about it amongst ourselves. Podcast is a great avenue. I think networking at events, encouraging all of us to go to events, to go to conferences, to, talk to other people in other programs in other countries, right?
Yeah,
and see how they're doing it and just keep that conversation moving so that it's a more normalized function of speaking up.
Yeah.
Right. So, the older generation, right, they, poo-poo on people that speak up. They don't want to hear it. They've got it all figured out. But this rising generation isn't about that. They want to be heard, and they have important things to say, and they feel empowered until we start pushing them down. They feel empowered to speak up. And I think the more we talk, the more normal it's going to be.
Linda just reminded me, she might know this. I remember I had just gotten promoted into a new role. This is before my consulting company. This might have been the reason I decided to start my own company and leave. Brand new role, kind of moved up into it. First meeting with the FSDO, right? The FAA guys are in the room, FAA guys and gals. We were going through a transition where there were multiple NVG vendors. And the question was asked by the FAA, hey, is this NVG manufacturer listed in your op specs, like in our FAA approved document, right? And I know the answer. So I spoke up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's and our director of ops looked at me across the table and he said, did someone give you truth serum? No one was asking you.
Oh.
And he just like, this isn't like, and I was like floored. So what do you think I did? I like crossed my arms.
Yeah.
I sit back and I'm just like, holy crap, man. So yeah, it's crazy.
How are you supposed to respond to something like that, right?
So I kind of shut down, and luckily, the FAA guys in the room, they came to me afterwards and they're like, hey, we appreciate you guys being honest. Like, let's work through this and let's get it out. Like this whole thing. And that was an example of kind of that toxic shutdown behavior that you can see. Like if that is going on in the boardroom, then it's definitely going on
elsewhere,
further
down.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. So, my point is everyone's experienced it, right? And I share that story because I want to say I'm not just some consultant that's never lived any of this stuff myself.
Right.
But like those are the things, I could have completely shut down, but I took that event and I then fostered my own relationship with the FAA.
Yeah.
And they started coming to me and I would give them the information they needed. And we had this like co-understanding of collaboration and transparency. But if you look at the opposite, in that situation, had leadership been, oh, sounds like why don't you share your information, and maybe had that conversation, that condescending conversation, at least in private, it would have been handled a lot differently.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no doubt. Well, this has been certainly a great discussion, and I wanted to touch one of the last topics along the way. Michael, you and Linda have had an opportunity to travel across the United States and help out various organizations in the air medical industry, and provide them with your passion and knowledge and sharing of information on how they can improve their programs. And I think that that's certainly a very unique or niche area of this industry, right? Built out of necessity. And I'm sure in your travels, you've probably come across a lot of maybe some of those informal leaders along the way, or those people that really seem to be the rising stars in the industry, or those people that really have that potential to take all of these tools that you are trying to give to somebody and really expound upon them, whether that be on a program level or whether that be on an industry level. And so you guys have decided to not just start your own company, but also to help foster some of that as well. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the scholarship that you have coming up through VyClimb.
Yeah. So we've started an organization separate from VyClimb. It's a nonprofit here in Colorado called the Uplift Collective. And the idea is to raise money to provide scholarships for individuals that have shown potential, right? So this isn't like a person brand new in the industry, but this is somebody who's been in the industry and is showing the potential for growth to get leadership or safety training to kind of further their experience, right? And to kind of fight that Peter principle that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, in our travels and working with clients, we've seen that leadership and safety training are the two like number one lowest rated in the terms of like quantity and quality of training that people have received. Also on the CAMES board, I've seen it, right? We're going through these programs, they're all de-identified, but we really noticed that there's a lot of programs that, tout millions of dollars they spend on the latest aircraft or, ventilators. But when it comes to safety, their safety manager, safety leader has been in the position for, 5 years and has never had any formal safety training. Things like, LIFT or SMTA, or from the leadership side, like NTLI through AIMS. There's countless conferences, that type of thing. So the idea was to create the Uplift Collective to try to raise funds to support those people individually. And then the long-term goal with it is to potentially sponsor some of those events. And if it's really successful, the ultimate goal would be to have our own leadership or safety, like summits, events, information sharing, kind of build that network out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this really came from, through all of our clients that we've worked with. Like, this was a constant recommendation that we were giving to every single client is you need leadership training. Your team needs leadership training. Your team needs leadership training. And, it got to the point where we're like, what can we do? Like, we now feel responsible because we know this information industry-wide. There's this lack of leadership training. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to help the industry be safer as a whole? And so that's kind of what we decided. We'd try to help and fill that gap. If the companies aren't going to do it, then we're going to do it because it's about the people ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean, I think exactly what you're doing is how you guys are going to help make this industry safer, just by having these conversations and having these commitments to share not only the experiences that you've had, but the ideas and the thoughts and the things that you have championed through hard work, dedication, doing study and getting out there. I think that's exactly how we are all going to make this job that we all love sustainable, right? Like, kind of what we talked about at the very beginning is how do we get people to stay? I think it's through exactly what you guys are doing. And I think that's amazing that you guys are bringing up this nonprofit to really kind of get this training out to everybody. I think that's really, really amazing job.
I think it's so important in the industry. We need to foster this, and this is the best job in the world. There is no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. And we need to make sure that those of us that are still in the industry and plan on being in it for a long time, that we don't lose sight of that, and that we foster that energy and we continue to grow it and make it into even something better. So really appreciate that you guys are taking on that initiative and really, take the bull by the horns and start leading the way with some of those things and really building that leadership training, because it is something that is so needed in the industry. So my hat's off to both of you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're excited.
Yeah, as you should be.
Yeah.
As you should be. Sure,
great.
a lot of hard work to get there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Maybe a little tired.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt.
But we won't speak up.
Well, thank you guys very much. Michael and Linda, it has been a pleasure speaking with you today. Really have enjoyed the conversation and you sharing a lot of your thoughts and knowledge of the industry. I think that this has brought a very interesting perspective in that you are not just talking about one program. You're not just talking about two programs. You've been involved with many, many programs throughout the U.S. and your understanding of the industry as a whole, I think, is oftentimes at a much different level than what the rest of ours is. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of that knowledge and understanding and insight with us. It has been a fantastic discussion, and it's been a pleasure having both of you on the podcast.
All right. Appreciate it. It was an honor to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
And if you guys do have some interested in finding out some more information about VyClimb or the Uplift Collective, you can certainly check out our YouTube channel. We'll have some links to them over there as well. And make sure you guys head on over to the Vertical Helicast platform at verticalhelicast.com. Check out our brother and sister shows over there with the Helicopter Podcast, Real Rescue Podcast, Vertical MRO Podcast, and the Hangar Z Podcast for some other great discussions along the way. I think you might even get to hear Michael on one of those other podcasts.
A couple other ones.
Well. Yeah. So thank you again to all of our listeners out there. It's been a pleasure talking with all of you guys today. And we appreciate the continued support of the Vertical Helicast platform. And we will see you next time on the Valor Flight Crew Podcast. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Valor Flight Crew Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Spectrum Aeromed. Spectrum Aeromed is your trusted partner in air medical solutions. Experience safety and innovation with their customized interiors, designed for both rotor and fixed-wing aircraft. Elevate your patient care with Spectrum Aeromed. For more information, visit spectrum-aeromed.com.
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, save lives, and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Well, that wraps up this episode of the Valor Flight Crew Podcast. A huge thank you again to Michael and Linda Benton from VyClimb for joining us and bringing such a grounded and meaningful perspective to the conversation around safety culture, leadership, and organizational values in aviation. Because at the end of the day, safety isn't just checklists and compliance. It's communication, it's trust, it's positive culture, and it's creating an environment where people feel supported enough to speak up, especially when it matters most. We hope this episode gives you something to take back to your base, your crews, and your leadership team. Whether it's a new way to approach training realism, a renewed focus on fatigue and human factors, or a reminder that safety management system has to be lived every day, not stored on a shelf. These are the conversations we need to be having in each and every program. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to share this episode with your team. Leave us a review and help us continue building a stronger, safer aviation community. Until next time, stay sharp, stay humble, look out for each other, and keep striving to elevate your team's safety culture each and every shift. We'll see you next week with more amazing stories in public safety aviation.